The human brain is, without a doubt, one of the wonders of the universe. Imagine this, that gelatinous mass of approximately 1.4 kilograms inside our skulls is capable of feats so extraordinary that even the best computers in the world would be envious. The neural connections within this intricate structure are more numerous than all the stars in the Milky Way. It's like having a personal galaxy pulsating in our heads, a true masterpiece of biology. When we look at the complexity of the brain, we realize that it is more mysterious than any suspense novel. Every thought, memory, and emotion is the result of an intricate dance of electrical and chemical signals, jumping from neuron to neuron. And yet, we have the audacity to think we understand everything that goes on in there. The truth is, the more we discover about the brain, the more we realize how much there is still to learn. Let's talk about reality and perception. The famous confusion between what we think we see and what is actually there. Who doesn't remember the dress that caused a worldwide war on Twitter? Was it blue and black or white and gold? Millions of people were perplexed to realize they were not seeing the same thing. And this is just one among many examples showing how our senses can deceive us. It turns out that our eyes, contrary to what we would like to believe, are not perfect cameras capturing the naked truth. They are more like image editing software, adjusting colors, contrasts, and shapes as our brain sees fit. And that's where things get interesting. What we see is not necessarily what is out there, but rather an interpretation created by the brain. It takes the raw information that the eyes capture and remodels, colors, and distorts it as it pleases. Have you ever thought that maybe the blue sky you see is not the same blue someone else sees? And when we're in a room full of people, we hear the same conversation, but each of us understands something slightly different. Now, let's move into even murkier territory, the illusion of the self. Who am I? Who are you? It seems like a simple question, but it is actually one of the deepest questions we can ask. Our sense of identity, that certainty that there is a constant me, is something we take for granted. But is it really? Neuroscientists and philosophers have debated this question for centuries, and the answers are far from reassuring. What we call I might be just a construction of the brain, a continuous narrative we create to make sense of our existence. Every memory, every experience, every thought contributes to this narrative, but that does not mean there is a fixed and immutable I behind everything. It is possible that we are just a conglomeration of mental processes, a series of temporary events that the brain cohesively gathers. And to make it even more fun, every time you remember something, you are actually recreating that memory, slightly altering it. So, the person you think you were in the past may not be exactly who you were. It's no wonder that sometimes we feel like strangers to ourselves. Have you ever had the sensation of not recognizing yourself in an old photo? Or read something you wrote years ago and wondered, did I really write that? Maybe this happens because, deep down, we are not the same person. We are constantly transforming, evolving, changing, like a river that is never the same at any given moment. This illusion of the self becomes even more complex when we consider that our brain does not work alone. It is constantly interacting with the environment, with other people, absorbing external influences that shape our perception of who we are. So, the I we know is also a patchwork of experiences, relationships, and cultures we have absorbed throughout life. And, as if it weren't already complicated enough, we have to deal with the illusions the brain itself creates to protect us. A classic example is dissociation, a defense mechanism where the mind disconnects from certain experiences or emotions to avoid pain. In extreme cases, this can lead to dissociative disorders, where a person literally creates multiple identities to cope with trauma. But let's not get lost in dark theories. The beauty of all this complexity is that it allows us to live a rich and varied life. We can be artists, scientists, dreamers, realists, all at the same time. We can question our own existence and, at the same time, marvel at the small joys of everyday life. We can get lost in our thoughts and suddenly find a new perspective we had never considered. So, the next time you look at the sky and wonder if the blue you see is the same blue someone else sees, or when you reflect on who you really are, remember that these questions have no easy answers. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is the greatest grace of life. After all, if everything were simple and straightforward, where would the fun be? The complexity of the human brain is a constant invitation to exploration, a mystery that keeps us always curious, always searching, always amazed by the vastness of our own being. And as long as we are here, navigating through the intricate networks of our thoughts and emotions, we can take comfort in the idea that, no matter how confusing the brain may be, it is also the source of everything that makes us human: the ability to question, to imagine, to laugh, and to love. Chapter 1: The World Through the Senses. Imagine the following situation. You are strolling through the park on a sunny day, feeling the gentle breeze on your face, hearing the birds singing, and admiring the colorful flowers around you. It seems that everything is exactly as you see, feel, and hear, right? Well, prepare to have your mind blown, because the truth is that your brain is constantly editing this reality into a director's cut version just for you. Let's unravel this delightful mystery of how our neurons transform sensory signals into an edited version of reality. First, we need to understand that our neurons are like little film editors, receiving raw information from the senses and transforming it into something that makes sense to us. When you see a flower, for example, the light reflected by the flower hits your eyes and is converted into electrical signals that travel to the brain. Here, the show begins. The brain does not simply record this light, it interprets it, taking into account a ton of factors like your memories, emotions, and even your expectations. It's as if the brain says, "Ah, a flower. Let's use that Instagram filter that makes everything prettier." These neural editors are incredibly skilled, but they are not infallible. Sometimes, they make hilarious mistakes, creating visual illusions that leave us scratching our heads. Who hasn't seen those images where parallel lines seem to bend or fixed points seem to move? Or better yet, who doesn't remember the famous dress that left the world divided between blue and black and white and gold? These phenomena occur because our brain tries to fill gaps or adjust information in a way that makes sense based on what it already knows. One of the most intriguing and fun illusions is change blindness. You might think you have a broad visual field and perceive everything around you, but the brain, being the clever lazybones it is, loves to save energy. It focuses only on the essential and ignores the rest, filling in gaps based on what it thinks should be there. It's like when you are watching a movie and, without realizing it, miss an important scene because you were looking at your phone. Your brain fills in what you missed with assumptions. To prove this, scientists conducted a famous experiment where they showed a group of people a scene of two people talking. During the conversation, something drastic would change, like the color of one person's shirt, and most participants didn't even notice. The brain simply did not register the change because it was focused on faces and words. It filled in the gaps based on the assumption that clothes wouldn't magically change color in the middle of a conversation. So, how does this affect our perception of the world? Well, it means that what we see, hear, and feel is actually a personalized and edited version of reality. Each of us lives in a slightly different world, created by the brain from a unique combination of sensory signals and interpretations. Your friend might see a cloudy afternoon as melancholic while you might find it comforting, all because your brains are editing these signals differently. This edited perception has its advantages. Imagine if you had to process every detail of your environment at all times. It would be a sensory overload. Our brain does an amazing job of simplifying things so we can focus on what really matters. But, of course, it also means we need to be aware that our perception can be misleading. A classic example is when you think you left your keys in a specific place, but they are not there. You search and search, but nothing. And then someone comes along and finds them exactly where you swore you had looked. It's not magic, it's the brain playing tricks. It decided the keys weren't there because your expectation was that they were somewhere else. It's like it said, "Don't worry, buddy, I got this for you." And it fails miserably. Not to mention the countless times we are deceived by our own vision. Have you ever looked at a shadow and thought it was an animal or a strange object? The brain loves to play with light and shadows, creating shapes that aren't there. This is a throwback to our prehistoric days when quickly identifying a predator could mean the difference between life and death. The brain prefers to err on the side of caution, creating forms that aren't there to keep us alert. So, where does this leave us? Living in a reality that is both wonderful and mysterious, full of tricks and illusions that make our daily experience much more interesting. Every day is a new opportunity for the brain to surprise us with a slightly different perception of the world. And maybe, just maybe, this helps us appreciate the complexity and beauty of being human. Sure, We might feel a bit disoriented knowing we never see pure and simple reality, but that's no reason for despair. On the contrary, it's a chance to embrace the subjectivity of human experience. The next time you and your friend disagree about the color of a dress or the position of an object, remember that you are both right in your own neural worlds. And as we navigate this sensory tapestry, let's remember that beauty lies in the imperfections and small flaws of our brains. After all, it's thanks to these edits and adjustments that we can see the world in a unique and personal way. Each perception, each sensation, is a reminder that we are more than simple receivers of information, we are creators of a vibrant and ever-changing reality. So, as you stroll through the park, listen to music, or simply observe the world around you, celebrate the wonder of having a brain that, despite its tricks and pranks, offers us an unparalleled sensory spectacle. And, above all, enjoy the journey, knowing that, at every moment, your brain is doing its best to provide you with an incredible sensory show. Chapter 2: The Reality of Illusions. It was a typical day on the internet until, suddenly, the world split into two factions, those who saw a dress as blue and black and those who swore it was white and gold. It seemed as if everyone had drunk some magical potion that affected their vision. But no, it was just another spectacular example of how our brain can deceive us in surprising and hilarious ways. The battle of the dress began when a photo was posted online, and no one could predict the commotion that would follow. Millions of people around the globe were perplexed to realize they were not seeing the same thing. Friends argued, couples debated, and even scientists joined the fray, trying to explain the phenomenon. The dress became a symbol of how our perception of reality can vary drastically from person to person. But why does this happen? How is it possible for two people looking at the same image to see completely different colors? The answer lies in how the brain adjusts our color perception based on assumptions about lighting. When you look at an object, your brain not only receives color information directly but also considers the surrounding light. It's like it has an internal Photoshop editor, adjusting the white balance and contrast to try to understand what it's really seeing. In the case of the dress, the image was an ambiguous lighting, which made people's brains make different assumptions about the light source. If your brain thought the dress was illuminated by natural light, you saw it as white and gold. If it interpreted the light as artificial, you saw it as blue and black. It's a true war of cerebral interpretation, showing that our eyes are not always the best judges of truth. This ability of the brain to adjust perceptions is fascinating and sometimes quite funny. An interesting example is how we perceive colors at sunset. The famous golden hour of photographers, when the sunlight becomes warmer and softer, can make colors seem more vibrant and saturated. Your brain adjusts perception to keep colors consistent, but these assumptions are not always accurate. Sometimes it exaggerates a bit in the editing. Besides visual illusions, our brain also likes to play tricks on our ears. Remember the Yanni versus Laurel phenomenon? That was another auditory puzzle that divided the world. It was as if, suddenly, everyone started speaking different languages. A simple audio, two completely different words heard by different people. How is this possible? Here, the magic happens because our brain tries to fill gaps in auditory signals just as it does with visual ones. The Yanni versus Laurel audio is a perfect example of how different sound frequencies can be interpreted in various ways. Depending on factors like age, sound equipment, and even small differences in the structure of the inner ear, some people heard Yanni and others, Laurel. It's as if the brain were playing a guessing game with sounds, trying to figure out which word made more sense. Our brain is a complete artist, adjusting and reinterpreting sensory information to create a cohesive version of reality. But it can also be easily fooled, showing us that the line between objective reality and subjective perception is extremely thin. This not only gives us material for endless online discussions but also reveals the complexity and adaptability of our minds. Another example of how the brain adjusts information based on assumptions is the famous auditory illusion called the tritone paradox. In this phenomenon, two musical notes are played in sequence, and people perceive the second note as higher or lower than the first, depending on the region where they live. The brain makes assumptions about the musical scale influenced by the cultural environment, showing that even our perception of pitch is not as objective as we would like to think. And who doesn't love a good motion illusion? Think of the famous animated GIFs that seem to change direction when you change the focus of your gaze. This happens because the brain makes assumptions about motion based on visual and contextual cues. When these cues are ambiguous, the brain can switch between different interpretations, creating the illusion of motion in opposite directions. It's as if the brain were playing a look here, now look there game just to confuse us. So, what have we learned from all this? That our perception of reality is a continuous construction and, often, full of flaws. Every vision, every sound, every sensation is filtered, adjusted, and interpreted by the brain, which tries to do the best job possible with the information it receives. But, like any editor, it also makes mistakes and exaggerations, creating versions of reality that can be as funny as they are bewildering. And perhaps the best part of all this complexity is that it allows us to see the world in unique and personal ways. Each of us has our own internal editor, adjusting colors, sounds, and sensations to create a unique sensory experience. And that's what makes life so rich and varied. After all, if everyone saw and heard exactly the same thing, where would the fun be? So, the next time you and your friends argue about the color of a dress or what you heard in an enigmatic audio, remember that you are all right in your own versions of reality. And that these little discrepancies are what make us human, with all our wonderful imperfections and quirks. Sensory perception is a continuous spectacle of interpretation and reinterpretation, where the brain is the conductor, directing a symphony of signals that transform into our personal vision of the world. And if, sometimes, it deceives us with an illusion here or a distortion there, that's okay. It's part of the show, and we are the lucky spectators of this intricate and fascinating play called life. Chapter 3: The Role of Pain and Sensations. You are at home, quietly preparing a delicious dinner when, suddenly, you accidentally touch a hot pan. Ouch! The instant pain makes you pull your hand back immediately, perhaps with a curse word slipping from your lips. Now, take a moment and think, that pain you felt, is it really real, or is it just an illusion created by the brain? Well, believe it or not, there's a good dose of cerebral magic involved in this process. Let's start with the idea that pain is a construction of the brain. Yes, that's right, pain might be more of an illusion than we would like to admit. Several fascinating experiments show that pain is not as simple as it seems. A famous example is the rubber hand experiment. In this study, participants place a fake hand in front of them and hide their real hand. When the rubber hand is stroked while the hidden real hand is touched in a similar manner, the brain begins to accept the fake hand as if it were real. Now, a light touch on the rubber hand can even be felt as pain if combined with a small tap on the real hand. It's the brain saying, "Oh, it seems the fake hand is part of my body." But things get even stranger. Another intriguing study involved people with amputated limbs who still felt pain in the limbs that were no longer there, the famous phantom limb pain. This happens because the brain, that trickster, maintains a complete map of the body, even of the parts that are no longer present. It sends pain signals as if the absent limb were still there, twisting the ankle or pinching the non-existent toes. It's like having a personal ghost, but instead of scaring you, it just wants to remind you how much it hurts not to have that arm or leg. And, as if it weren't surreal enough, we have heat and cold sensors, which are another fascinating piece of the sensory puzzle. Our brain interprets contradictory temperature signals in quite peculiar ways. Have you ever held something so cold it felt hot? This happens because the receptors for heat and cold in our skin can be activated simultaneously, confusing our brain and creating contradictory sensations. Imagine having one hand in warm water and the other in cold water for a while. Then, place both in room temperature water. The hand that was in the cold will find the water warm, while the hand that was in the warm will find the water cold. It's a real internal parlor trick. But what is the evolutionary importance of pain that torments us so much? Well, it's more useful than it seems. Pain is like a biological alarm that helps us survive. Think of our ancestors running through the African savannas. The one who felt the sting of a scorpion and quickly pulled back had a better chance of surviving and passing on their genes. It's a quick and painful lesson: don't touch that bright, dangerous animal. Without pain, we could easily injure ourselves without realizing it, touching fire, cutting ourselves, or continuing to dance on a sprained ankle. Besides being a danger alarm, pain also serves as a learning tool. Have you ever thought about why you don't touch the hot pan again? Because the pain from the first encounter was so memorable that your brain learned to associate a hot pan with don't touch. It's an internal educational system that teaches us through negative experiences, helping to avoid future misfortunes. Pain, however, is not just a defense mechanism, it is also deeply personal and subjective. What is painful for one person may be a simple discomfort for another. This is because pain is a complex mixture of physical, emotional, and psychological factors. Stress, anxiety, and even emotional state can amplify or reduce the sensation of pain. Have you noticed how everything seems to hurt more when you are in a bad mood or stressed? That's the brain amplifying pain signals, making everything more intense. And as evolution never does anything halfway, the brain has also developed ways to effectively deal with pain. When we are in real danger, it can release endorphins, our natural painkillers, that help relieve pain and allow us to keep going. Imagine a wounded warrior in battle who, thanks to this release of endorphins, can fight to the end. It's our own biological superpower. Returning to heat and cold sensors, another interesting curiosity is how our bodies sometimes don't know how to deal with extremes. When you jump into a cold pool, your body goes into shock, and all your temperature sensors trigger alarms at the same time. Your brain tries to understand what is happening and decides it's an emergency. But after a while, it gets used to it, adjusts perception, and you start to feel less cold. The same goes for when you enter a hot sauna. At first, it feels like you are going to melt, but after a while, the sensation becomes more bearable. It's like the brain saying, "Okay, got it, let's adjust so we don't go crazy." All this perception game shows us how our brain is a master at creating personalized realities. It protects us, teaches us, and sometimes even plays tricks on us with its interpretations. Pain, despite often being seen as something negative, is an essential part of our human experience. It warns us of dangers, helps us learn and grow, and even unites us in our condition as vulnerable beings. Chapter 4: Consciousness and Self-Awareness. Prepare to dive into one of humanity's greatest mysteries, consciousness. Imagine a small theater inside your head, with red curtains and bright spotlights. The main play? Your own life. This is what consciousness does. It puts you center stage, making you the protagonist of your story. But how exactly does the brain generate this vivid, central experience? Let's investigate. Consciousness is a true enigma. Despite all our knowledge about the brain, the question of how these moments of clarity arise, this sensation of being here now, continues to intrigue us. Scientists around the world have theories, models, and experiments, but the truth is we are still groping in the dark, looking for the switch that will illuminate the entire functioning of this mysterious phenomenon. For example, there is a condition known as blind sight, which makes this story even more intriguing. Blind sight occurs in patients who have suffered damage to the primary visual cortex and are technically blind. However, they can respond to visual stimuli without being aware of it. Imagine asking someone to guess the direction of a light they cannot see, and they get it right most of the time. These patients do not have the conscious experience of seeing, but their brain somehow still processes visual information. It's like having a second theater hidden backstage, where scenes are rehearsed without an audience. Blind sight leads us to question to what extent perception and consciousness are intertwined. If we can process information without being aware of it, what else might our brain be doing behind the scenes without our knowledge? Perhaps, while we are distracted, our neurons are rehearsing entire plays without telling us. Now, let's talk about memory, another fascinating character in the theater of consciousness. Every time you remember something, your brain is not simply pulling a file off the shelf. It is, in fact, recreating that memory, editing and adjusting it like a meticulous director. Ever wondered why your childhood vacation memories seem a bit more magical and perfect than they probably were? It's because each time you remember, you are reconstructing that memory with a touch of nostalgia and perhaps some more vibrant colors. Memory works more like a game of telephone than a recorded video. Think of the last time you told a story about a past event. Each time you tell it, small details change. Maybe you exaggerate a bit to make the story more interesting, or perhaps you omit something that now seems irrelevant. Over time, these small changes accumulate, and the original memory can transform into something quite different from what actually happened. This malleability of memory is both fascinating and a bit alarming. If our memories are so mutable, To what extent can we trust them? And if our most cherished and identity-forming experiences are partly fictions created by our own brain, what does that mean for our sense of self? It's a thought that ties your mind in knots. The brain's ability to edit and rewrite our memories has its evolutionary advantages. It helps shape our identity, allows us to learn from the past, and motivates us to move forward. A memory of a failure, for example, can be softened over time, allowing us to try again without the full weight of the fear of failing. Our memories are flexible tools that help us navigate the present and future, even if they sometimes distort the past a bit. In the midst of all this complexity, consciousness emerges as a well-tuned orchestra, where each neuron plays its role in the symphony of experience. But like any good symphony, there are many layers and nuances that we don't always perceive. Sometimes, the music keeps playing even when we are not directly listening. A curious example of how memory and consciousness can intertwine in unexpected ways is the phenomenon of false recognitions. Have you ever visited a new place and had the sensation that you had been there before? This déjà vu is the brain mixing memories and sensations, creating an illusion of familiarity. It's like the director of the play confusing the set of one act with another, making you believe you have seen that scene before. Another intriguing example is when you meet someone new and have the sensation that you already knew this person. Sometimes, it's just your brain playing with familiar faces, trying to fit this new person somewhere in your mental gallery. It's like it is flipping through an old photo album, trying to find a match. And while we talk about these experiences, we cannot forget the crucial role that language plays in forming consciousness. Language allows us to name and categorize our experiences, giving them shape and structure. Without words, our thoughts would be like floating clouds, hard to grasp. Through language, we can organize our ideas, share our stories, and create a coherent narrative of who we are. And what about dreams? Ah, dreams, those nocturnal wonders that defy logic and reality. In dreams, consciousness operates without the constraints of the waking world, creating surreal scenarios and bizarre narratives. It's the brain playing at being an art film director, unconcerned with plot or coherence. And yet, we wake up with the sensation that, somehow, it all made sense while we were asleep. Thinking about consciousness is like trying to hold fine sand. The more you try to grasp it, the more it slips through your fingers. But this complexity, this continuous dance of perceptions, memories, and interpretations, is what makes the human mind so fascinating. We live in a constant theater of experiences, with the brain as the director, screenwriter, and editor, providing us with an uninterrupted performance we call life. And so, as we continue our journey to uncover the secrets of consciousness, we can only marvel at the intricate tapestry our brains weave every day. Every thought, every memory, every sensation is a thread in this tapestry, forming a picture that is both unique and universal. It is a work of art in constant evolution, never to be fully deciphered but always to be admired. So, the next time you find yourself reflecting on the nature of your own mind, remember that you are participating in one of the greatest spectacles of the universe. Your brain, with all its complexities and peculiarities, is constantly creating and recreating reality. And that, in itself, is a truly inspiring thought. Chapter 5: The Creation of Internal Reality. Imagine you are on a stage, with the brain as the director, screenwriter, and editor of a constantly evolving play called your life. Every second, new scenes are added, old ones are revised, and often entire segments are cut or forgotten. This is the ongoing process of constructing identity, a narrative the brain creates and maintains to help us understand who we are. Identity is like a dynamic mosaic, composed of memories, experiences, and feelings. From the moment we are born, the brain starts collecting data and forming a coherent story. Imagine a small child who cannot yet speak but is already beginning to build their identity. Each smile from the parents, each colorful toy, each new discovery is a piece of this ever-expanding puzzle. The child is absorbing everything like a sponge, creating a foundation on which their identity will be built. And here's the masterstroke: the infant brain is a true synapse factory. The neural connections, the highways through which electrical signals travel, are being constructed at an astonishing speed. A baby has more synapses than an adult, giving them enormous brain plasticity. It's as if the brain were building a superhighway for knowledge, with extra lanes for all the new information coming in. As the child grows, the brain undergoes a neural pruning process. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like, a true mental gardening. Connections that are not frequently used are eliminated, allowing the more important connections to strengthen and become more efficient. This process, called synaptic pruning, is crucial for the development of more sophisticated skills and behaviors. Imagine a diligent gardener trimming dead branches to allow healthier plants to flourish. The result is a brain that is constantly adapting and optimizing its own efficiency. But the construction of identity is not a process limited to childhood. Even in adulthood, the brain continues to adjust and refine the narrative of our lives. Every new experience, every new learning, every challenge overcome adds another layer to our identity. And memory plays a fundamental role in this process. Each time we recall a past event, we are actually recreating that memory. This reconstruction process can alter details, add new information, or even change how we feel about that event. Imagine you are recalling your childhood summer vacations. The memories come to mind, full of colors and smells, but you may notice that each time you tell the story, some details change. Perhaps the beach house gets a little bigger, the ice cream a bit sweeter. The brain is constantly editing and rewriting these memories to fit the current narrative of who we are. It's as if we had an internal editor who, while reviewing old chapters, adapts them to make sense with the new ones. The evolution of child consciousness is one of the most fascinating things to observe. Children see the world in a way we adults often forget. They live in a state of constant discovery, where every little thing can be an entire universe. A child's brain is like an ever-open amusement park, where every new experience is a ride waiting to be explored. This insatiable curiosity is fueled by the abundant neural connections that facilitate rapid learning and adaptation. As we mature, the brain begins to prioritize efficiency over quantity. The synapses we use most often become stronger, while those that are unnecessary disappear. This process is especially pronounced during adolescence, a critical period of brain development. This is why teenagers can learn new skills so quickly, but also why they can seem so impulsive and emotional. Their brains are still adjusting their neural highways to find the most efficient path. And then we reach adulthood, where the brain achieves a balance between plasticity and efficiency. The construction of identity continues, but now it is shaped by more complex experiences and reflections. Each decision we make, each relationship we build, each challenge we face, all these elements are integrated into our personal narrative. It's like we are writing and revising an autobiography in real time, adjusting and refining the story of our lives. Neural connections are not static. Even in old age, the brain has the capacity to form new synapses and adapt to new circumstances. Studies show that learning new skills, such as playing a musical instrument or learning a new language, can promote neuroplasticity at any age. It's as if the brain is saying, it's never too late to add an exciting new chapter to your story. So, how does this continuous construction of identity affect us in our daily lives? Well, it gives us a sense of continuity and cohesion. Despite the changes and challenges we face, we have an internal sense of who we are, shaped by our memories and experiences. This helps us make decisions, set goals, and connect with others. Our identity is the internal compass that guides us through the complexities of life. But it's important to remember that this personal narrative is not an absolute truth. It is an edited, adjusted, and sometimes even fictionalized version of reality. Our memories can deceive us, our perceptions can be distorted, and yet this story we tell ourselves is crucial for our survival and well-being. And so, we continue to write our story, with the brain as our tireless editor. Each new day is a blank page, waiting to be filled with the adventures and misadventures of life. The construction of identity is a fascinating process, full of nuances and complexities, that defines and differentiates us. It is living proof that we are, indeed, the stories we tell ourselves. And what an incredible story that is. Chapter 6, Measuring Consciousness. Imagine yourself as an explorer, but instead of navigating jungles and mountains, you are journeying through the mysterious vastness of the human brain. Welcome to the incredible world of neuroimaging techniques, where fMRI and EEG are your magical tools to unravel the secrets of the mind. Prepare for an exciting journey filled with fascinating discoveries about how these technologies map brain activity, measure the complexity of neural signals, and are applied clinically to assess unconscious patients. Our first stop on this adventure is functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI. Imagine having a superpower that allows you to see inside the human brain while it's in action. It's almost like watching a fireworks show in slow motion. fMRI gives us a detailed view of the brain in action, highlighting which areas are most active when we are, for example, solving a puzzle or daydreaming about a delicious ice cream. fMRI works by detecting changes in blood flow. When a region of the brain is more active, it consumes more oxygen. To meet this demand, blood flow to that area increases. fMRI captures these variations and creates colorful images showing the areas of greatest activity. It's like a heat map of the mind, revealing the hot spots of neural activity. But wait, the journey doesn't end there. Meet now the EEG, or electroencephalogram, a tool that seems straight out of a science fiction movie. With the EEG, we place a series of electrodes on the scalp and record the electrical waves that neurons produce as they fire. It's like listening to the brain's symphonic concert, where each neuron is an instrument contributing to the complex melody of the mind. EEG is especially useful because it records brain activity in real time, capturing changes that occur in fractions of a second. It's perfect for studying fast brain events, such as those involved in sensory perception or split-second decision-making. Imagine watching an action movie where every scene is meticulously timed. EEG allows scientists to follow each of these rapid transitions, offering a granular view of brain activity. Now, let's dive into the complexity of brain activity. The brain is an incredibly complex machine, with billions of neurons connected by trillions of synapses. Measuring this complexity can give us valuable clues about levels of consciousness. Imagine we are at a party full of people. The more people talking, dancing, and interacting, the more complex the environment. The same goes for the brain. The quantity and diversity of neural interactions can indicate how alive the mind is. Scientists have developed methods to quantify this complexity by analyzing patterns of brain activity. They can use fMRI to observe networks of connections in different mental states or EEG to analyze the variation of brain waves. These techniques reveal that the conscious mind is characterized by a high degree of connectivity and diversity of signals. It's as if the conscious brain is constantly participating in an energetic party, full of dynamic and vibrant interactions. We then arrive at the clinical application of these techniques. Imagine a patient in a coma or vegetative state. Determining their level of consciousness is a critical challenge. This is where fMRI and EEG shine like guiding stars. Using these tools, doctors can gain insights into the brain activity of unconscious patients, helping to assess their condition more accurately. In a notable study, scientists used fMRI to ask vegetative state patients to imagine playing tennis or walking around their house. Surprisingly, some of these individuals showed brain activity similar to that of healthy individuals when performing these imaginary tasks. This suggested that, despite their outward appearance, these minds were, in some way, conscious and responding to commands. EEG has also been crucial in clinical settings. Doctors can use this technique to monitor brain activity in patients undergoing delicate surgeries or in intensive care units. Patterns of brain waves can provide immediate information about the patient's neurological state, allowing for quicker and more precise interventions. It's like having a sophisticated radar warning when a storm is approaching, giving doctors a crucial advantage in protecting the patient's health. These neuroimaging techniques are not just diagnostic tools, they also open doors to new therapeutic possibilities. For example, neurofeedback, a technique that uses EEG to teach patients to self-regulate their brain activity. Imagine playing a video game where your brain is the controller. You learn to modify your own brain waves to achieve desired states, such as greater concentration or relaxation, improving conditions like anxiety, ADHD, and even depression. Another promising application is deep brain stimulation, DBS, used to treat conditions like Parkinson's disease. Guided by detailed fMRI images, electrodes are implanted in the brain to send electrical pulses to specific areas, relieving symptoms and improving patients' quality of life. It's like installing a pacemaker in the mind, adjusting the brain's rhythm to improve health. Additionally, fMRI is being used to map brain networks involved in psychiatric disorders, such as schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Understanding these networks can lead to more targeted and effective treatments. It's like mapping a city's subway system to identify problematic points and improve traffic flow, ensuring everyone gets to their destination more efficiently. Neuroimaging techniques are revolutionizing our understanding of the human brain. They allow us to see the mind in action, measure the complexity of thoughts, and apply this knowledge in clinical contexts to improve people's lives. It's a constantly evolving field, full of discoveries and innovations that bring us closer to unraveling the mysteries of the mind. So, when you contemplate the vastness of the universe or the depths of the ocean, remember that one of the greatest mysteries is right inside your own head. Thanks to the wonders of neuroimaging, we are one step closer to understanding this incredible machine that is the human brain. And who knows what else we will discover as we continue to explore this final frontier. The human brain is like that abstract artist you find in a modern art gallery, creative, interpretive, and sometimes a bit eccentric. Instead of providing a photographic representation of reality, it creates a personalized and edited version of the world around us. And that's a good thing. After all, if our brains were perfect cameras, capturing every minute detail, we would be overwhelmed with irrelevant information. Instead, our brain selects, filters, and distorts sensory data to create an image of the world that helps us survive and thrive. Have you ever noticed how a smell or a song can instantly transport you back to a specific moment in your life? This happens because the brain is constantly making associations and adjusting our perception based on past experiences. If you smell fresh bread and instantly remember mornings at your grandmother's house, that is not just a memory, it's your brain using those memories to create a sense of comfort and familiarity. This mental trick might have been vital for our ancestors who needed to remember which fruits were safe to eat and which could be dangerous. Let's talk a bit about the value of consciousness. Understanding how our brain creates our perception of the world is not only fascinating but can also enrich our lives in surprising ways. When we realize that our view of reality is a brain construction, we can start to question our perceptions and open our minds to new possibilities. Instead of seeing the world in black and white, we begin to appreciate the shades of gray and colorful nuances that make life so rich and varied. Consider a situation where you and a friend are watching a breathtaking sunset. While you might be capturing every vivid detail of the colors and clouds, your friend might be more focused on the feeling of relaxation the scene evokes. Both of you are experiencing the same event but through different lenses. This understanding can help us be more empathetic and understanding, recognizing that each person has their own interpretation of reality. And we cannot forget how humility and self-awareness emerge from this understanding. Knowing that our perception is a construction makes us realize how complex and wonderful the human brain is. Instead of feeling like we own the truth, we become more open and willing to learn from others' perspectives. After all, if our minds can create a unique version of the world, imagine how many other interesting and valid versions exist out there. Imagine you are in a heated debate on any topic. Instead of clinging firmly to your perspective, how about considering that the other person might be seeing the same issue in a completely different way? Not because they are wrong or because you are right, but because your brains are constructing distinct realities based on your unique experiences and contexts. This approach not only promotes more effective communication but can also transform conflicts into opportunities for mutual growth. Now, let's add a bit of fun to this reflection. Imagine that your brain is like a whimsical movie director. It edits, cuts, and adjusts scenes to tell a story that makes sense to you. Sometimes it exaggerates the colors, other times it adds a dramatic soundtrack. And, of course, we cannot forget the special effects, like when we are scared and everything around us seems more threatening. Knowing that our brain is this creative director can help us laugh at our own exaggerated perceptions and not take everything so seriously. After all, if our brain is a director, we are the protagonists and also the audience of this incredible theatrical play called life. Understanding this allows us to appreciate the beauty of imperfections, not only in our perceptions but in ourselves and others. We are all works of art in progress, each with our own unique brushstrokes, sometimes blurred, other times perfectly outlined. This understanding can lead us to value shared experiences more. When we watch a movie with friends, we know that each of us will have a slightly different interpretation of the story. And this diversity of perceptions is what makes the post-movie discussions so enriching. The same goes for life. Our interactions with others are colored by a vast palette of unique experiences and perceptions. The beauty of imperfection and the value of consciousness are concepts that, when embraced, offer us a richer and deeper view of human existence. Recognizing that our perceptions are constructions makes us more humble, open, and connected. And, perhaps most importantly, it allows us to see the world with a touch of humor and lightness, appreciating each moment as an imperfect yet incredibly beautiful masterpiece.